Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan. This is We the Govern. And today we're going to be going to Eastern Washington, going to Franklin County, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of drama that's going on out there right now. This involves illegal pay raises, an angry sheriff, a jail dispute, seizing guns, assault claims, helpless at Hapo. It's all kinds of stuff. It's more drama than any little county should ever have, and unfortunately, it is far from over. So let's just jump right into it. But before we do, I just want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed or liked this channel and you like content like this, please do so down below, and feel free to share this video with others who may be interested in this type of content, especially if you live in Washington State. So if you don't know where Franklin County is, well, that's okay. There's 39 counties in Washington. Every one of them has something going for it. Franklin County is actually in Eastern Washington here. And the biggest city in Franklin County is Pasco. It's kind of part of the Tri-Cities area, which is something that most people in Washington State are familiar with. And I am titling today's video The Fiasco in Pasco, because even though this really doesn't have anything specifically to do with the city of Pasco, I just like how it sounds, and it isn't as easy to rhyme with Franklin. So let's just get into this, because what kind of got me a little bit more interested in Franklin County recently was this Attorney General opinion that came out actually here on April 9th, 2025. And this is actually the first Attorney General opinion that came out in 2025 under the new Nick Brown. But it had actually started here quite a while ago. If you go ahead and look at the history of this Attorney General opinion, the original request came, it looks like it was motivated by the Franklin County auditor, although it's addressed to the Franklin County prosecutor from the Attorney General's office. And it essentially, the title appears very obvious. It's just saying that, listen, elected officials know they're not allowed to actually go and give themselves pay raises in the middle of their term, especially when they're basically given the authority to raise their pay. They're not allowed to do that while they're in office. They can do it for the next year, but they can't do the next election cycle, but they can't do it right now. And that's essentially what this boils down to. Now, it's kind of odd. This one just came out as it regards to Franklin County, and some history is going on there. But if that was the only thing going on in Franklin County, I might not be doing this video. But there's unfortunately a heck of a lot more. And if you actually go and look at the Franklin County reports that have come out recently at the state auditor's office, here's one of them. It's not the only one. This is basically a report that had some problems in Franklin County, unfortunately. And they had two of them this month that came out. That one and this one right here, which is an accountability audit report. And I'm going to link to both of these reports and the Attorney General opinion down below if you're interested. And I'm also linking to a blog site that's put out by the Franklin County Auditor's Office. The elected auditor there is Matt Beaton, and he has this blog site here that provides a lot of source documents. I actually think this is pretty helpful. I don't see a lot of auditors around the state having blog sites like this. I think this is actually pretty helpful if you just want to get a little bit more history, at least from his perspective, on exactly what's going on here in Franklin County. So let's just get into it, and I just want you to see some of the stuff that is happening. So it appears that, and this is a very recent, it's getting the news all the way on the west side. It's not just being confined to the Tri-City Herald out there in Franklin County, but there's a standoff now between the Franklin County Sheriff Commission and the commissioners, and it's escalating over who's controlling the county jail. Now, the reason why this is going on right now was really detailed in this auditor's report that came out from the state auditor's office, because several of the findings involved problems with the Franklin jail and the Franklin County jail, and just some issues about how that was being managed. Because at this point in time in Franklin County, the sheriff is the elected official who's in charge of the jail. Now, if you look around counties all around Washington State, some counties have the sheriff managing the jail and some of them don't. So it's not radically unusual to have jails that are separate from the sheriff's office, and it's fairly normal for them to be under the sheriff's office. It's not the end of the world either way, but in Franklin County currently, or up until very recently, the sheriff was managing the jail. And unfortunately, according to this audit report, and remember, by the time that report came out this month, this information was already made aware to the county commissioners probably last year, if not much earlier. And part of this had to do with this missing $937,000 from the food service commissary vendor. Now, in a small county like Franklin County, they have less than 100,000 people live there, and And if you're missing almost $1 million from that food service commissary vendor, and it's been going on for years, and you haven't done anything about it, then there's a problem. And it would be understandable for normal people to think exactly how is the jail being managed, at least financially. On top of that, it looks like the jail also spent an extra $1.2 million, more than had ever been approved for medical services in the jail. And it's fairly normal for the medical services to be different than projected, and the sheriff can step in and say, listen, we need more money, or budget accordingly, or change things. But the combined problem between these two issues in the jail was several $1 million that essentially are missing or unaccounted for or unapproved anyway. And it seemed like that is the driving motivation for the county commissioners to say, listen, Sheriff, we're going to be separating this jail and having it managed differently than it's been in the past. So it's not a surprise. And if you have any fiduciary responsibility for your basically how your people's tax dollars are spent, you're going to step in and intervene if it doesn't seem like things are being run properly. And so it looks like the county commissioners were concerned the sheriff wasn't managing the funds properly, and they just wanted to separate the supervision of the jail from that sheriff. And that is what led to a shocking level of drama over a relatively bureaucratic decision, because the sheriff really went very public on this and was talking about how it was an unconstitutional seizure of assets or something like this. I don't know that the sheriff is right in the way he's trying to explain this, because obviously the assets of Franklin County belong to the taxpayers of Franklin County and the residents who live there. They belong to the people. They don't belong to some individual who may be elected by those people. And one of the challenges here, the crazy headlines that have been starting to come out here, is that he was basically, the sheriff here was, and I'll link to these stories down below, but the sheriff here is basically coming out and saying, listen, I'm telling my deputies to go and seize all the guns at the jail, and the jailers will have no way to defend themselves, and I'm going to take them all away from them because they're my assets, not the jail's assets. And a judge ruled against him and said, no, you can't do that. Those firearms do stay at the jail. And he was threatening his deputies and saying that they were in some kind of insurrection or mutiny, I think was the word he used, because they wouldn't follow his orders to disobey the injunction that the judge had put and the ruling the judge had put. I mean, it's not a surprise. But the sheriff went out there and actually he decided to break that court order, and he went out and just seized all those firearms himself, which then also added to the other unusual complication and a headline I don't typically see, where it appears that he also physically assaulted the jail commander, at least according to an accusation that came out just very recently. And this is an unfolding level of drama in Franklin County over the control of the jail. So this sheriff does seem to have some other problems, though. And part of this I had to find if I went to this blog site here again by the Franklin County Auditor's Office, because there had been another court decision, a judgment earlier this year that had come out, and it had to do with it looks like the Facebook posts. The sheriff's very active on social media, which I think is probably a good thing. I do generally encourage elected officials to be as open as possible and transparent as possible with the decisions that you're making and the activities that you're doing. Social media is a great and efficient way of doing that. It does look like, though, according to this court record right here, and a judgment that came out against the sheriff and Franklin County earlier in February here, and it was about a $26,000 judgment. $16,000 of that was for attorney fees, and $5,000 each to two kind of lower-level employees at the auditor's office who were being bullied and threatened by the sheriff for, of all things, just like a relatively minor bookkeeping thing, where they appear to be, according to some of the records I could dig up, they were trying to track and control expenses. And the sheriff here featured in this photo that he sent out of a steak dinner that he was having in Spokane, and he was angry that these employees who worked in the auditor's office were doing their job and trying to hold the elected officials to a standard of $36 per diem for dinner. And if you go out to fancy steak dinners in Spokane, even before the recent increase in costs, it was hard to keep your dinner under $36, and he went over by $21. And these lower level employees were just saying, hey, $21, you have to reimburse it. If you've ever been around this kind of stuff, this is like very, very normal thing. You'd find an expense that was beyond the allowable limit. You don't make exceptions for that. You just reimburse. It's true if you work in a private company, and it's true if you work in government in particular. It's not your money. It's a taxpayer's money. And why this became such a ridiculous dispute seems as blown out of proportion as I've ever seen in government. But it essentially, and that's the sheriff there in the far corner of this photo holding up the bottle of wine. I don't know why you'd share this photo out as part of your strategy to tell them why you deserve to have that extra $21, but for whatever reason, that led to the judgment that Franklin County, unfortunately, was stuck with, because even though the sheriff did this and the lawsuit named him, he's covered under the risk pool, and so the way the lawsuit panned out, not a big judgment, but it's still a relatively pointless judgment over a $21 expense that cost the county an extra $26,000 plus some other expenses. So that the sheriff seems to be having a lot of problems here in Franklin County. Now, when you go back to this report here that the auditor's office put out, it was interesting because the jail was only part of it. And that's why I'm really getting into this, because there's a lot of problems here in Franklin County that seem to be getting uncovered, or at least being having more light shined on them right now. And the other part was having to do with this HAPO, which is this public event center. It's like you can rent it. It's in Pasco, so Fiasco and Pasco is appropriate here. But essentially, there were a lot of financial problems with the HAPO event center. And it's a great place. I've been there before. It's a good place to put on a venue or an event. And inevitably, if you're going to own one of these publicly, they are very difficult. It's very difficult to make money doing these. I know everybody thinks that for some reason these event centers are just going to bring in loads of cash, and I've addressed this many times with local governments that are empire building, and they think that they can build these and make a lot of money. But in this case, one of the problems that the county auditor had found, and then on top of that, the state auditor coming in appears to have agreed with them, is that the county had just ended up hiring a vendor which just didn't follow their contractual requirements. And very specifically, that vendor wouldn't produce any kind of accounting records that were required by the contract. So in other words, the county hires this vendor, food service vendor, to provide supplies and services for the event center, and then it's a black hole, and they can't provide any evidence of how that money was spent or where it went, even though the contract very clearly required them to do it. So obviously the vendor gets replaced, and an outside CPA firm was hired by the county to come in and try to clean up the books to figure out exactly what happened here. And they apparently were unable to fix the problem. And the new vendor that came in, that seems to be, at least right now, doing the job that they were hired to do, seems to be doing it okay, but there was some dispute and some issues and some differences of opinion inside the county as to how this thing should have been managed, and that drama was addressed in that very same report. And usually when the auditor's office puts out these reports, are kind of focused on just one issue, but there were just a bunch of issues that came out all at once in that same report. Keep in mind, that's only one report. There were two other reports with other kinds of problems that were going on. But let's get back to this Attorney General opinion, which is the one that kind of got me more engaged and involved, and coming back and paying attention to Franklin County and to figure out exactly what's going on here. And what this really involved, and the reason why they even came out and asked for this, is it goes all the way back to, and you can see some articles if you search for it. I'll link to some of those down below too. The Attorney General is basically saying, hey, listen, the Franklin County Commission, which, by the way, the commissioners that did this, none of them are actually in office now. It was a historic commission that was there back in 2016. They decided to make these benefit changes for themselves, to financially benefit themselves illegally, and they violated the Washington State Constitution. And what this really boiled down to is back in 2016, they were on that election day, which was weird because the Franklin commissioners essentially had a special meeting and they essentially just voted themselves a pay raise. Now, that wasn't what they found that was illegal. I guess if they'd waited a few weeks to do it, then they would have been in trouble. But anyway, they voted themselves a pay raise right on election day. So half the ballots are counted, but the election's not over yet. So they apparently were within the window of time that theoretically, as unethical as it appears, they got away with that. But what they didn't get away with was that, or according to this AGO opinion anyway, is that after Election Day, they then met again, and they essentially said, hey, we're going to create this kind of cash out way of cashing out our health benefits and basically allowing us to get health benefits, which they could already have under the terms of the contract. But instead of rolling it into that they wanted the ability to cash it out because maybe they had health benefits under some other program, and it was a way of essentially giving themselves extra income that wasn't approved, and it was illegal because, as the Attorney General points out, and it's pretty clear in Washington State Constitution, Article 2, Section 25, Article 21, Section 8, and Article 30, Section 1, you just can't vote yourself a pay raise during your term when you are controlling the purse and the decisions on how much people are being paid. You could vote a pay raise that comes into effect after the next election, but you can't do it right in the middle of your term because you're essentially using your position to personally benefit yourself illegally. And what it appears right now, at least according to that Attorney General opinion, the way I'm reading it, the county's going to have to go back and collect probably close to $100,000 from these previous commissioners. It's a different amount for each of them. It's not the same. It depends on how much money they took. But that's pretty significant, and it was also quite avoidable because when you go back and you look in the history on this case, it looks to me like there was a lot of attention drawn to that decision at the time, and there was a refusal of those commissioners to address that issue, and now, 8 years down the road, essentially, that bad choice and decision is going to be addressed now. Why this particularly matters to me as I look at Franklin County is that despite being a small county and one of 39 counties in Washington State, it seems to have an inordinate amount of problems that have popped up over the years as it regards to financial issues. Now, years ago, this guy right here, Dennis Houston, managed to be convicted and go to prison for stealing $2.7 million. Now, I'm going to point out that's what he was convicted for. It was believed later as they went back and dug through some of the records, which weren't as great back in the 90s, that they probably stole closer to $3.2 million at the end of the day. This was their public works director, and he was in the accounting department and public works. And for 22 years, this guy managed to steal $24,000 plus every month, setting up fake checks that he would send out to a vendor that was long since gone and cashing them for himself, among other things. They've never recovered any of the money, and he's actually since gotten out of prison. He was sentenced to prison for 16 years. He got out a little early, and so he can probably go get his next government job pretty soon. But the point is, you're in a county where this guy was just sentenced to prison, not within recent memory, and was over 10 years ago, but nevertheless, he went to prison for this, and he had been stealing money for 2 decades and passing every state audit that ever came their way during that time. And you'd think that they would be, whether you're the sheriff or those older county commissioners voted themselves a pay raise, whatever it was, you would think that they'd be paying a little bit more attention to this. Unfortunately, I don't think this is even close to being done right now. That's why I'm going to say this Fiasco and Pasco, it's to be continued because we have this unfolding drama with the sheriff in the jail and all the stuff related to that. There's the question. Unfortunately, the prosecutor out here doesn't seem to be that interested in getting the taxpayer funds back. That concerns me, just based on some quotes that he has in the paper right now. The taxpayers of Franklin County should demand that money to be returned from those elected officials. They cannot just unconstitutionally give themselves bonus funds, $100,000 total or so, and then pretend like, oh, so sorry, we're just not going to give it back to you. I don't think that's right, and the prosecutor needs to step up and be more aggressive out there. I do like the fact that, at least based on what I'm reading, that the current county commission at least has a majority on it that seems to be focused on trying to correct some of these problems. The county auditor, looking at that blog site, and as much as he's gotten a lot of blowback, it looks like from some of these people who didn't like to be held accountable, it looks like he's doing a pretty good job out there as well. And to their credit, both the Attorney General in the opinion, which took them a ridiculous amount of time to make a decision on, but nevertheless, the opinion seems to be very solid. The and well-reasoned and consistent with the Constitution, which is a nice change of pace for Washington State's Attorney General's office. And also, the state auditors' reports seem to be done pretty well. I know that it looks like they're being triggered because of requests by the county auditor or by people in Franklin County, but nevertheless, they're coming out and doing their jobs, and they're finding a lot of stuff out there. Now, again, I bring up this kind of a story because I want to point out that oftentimes, if more people are engaged and involved, even in smaller jurisdictions. I did a video recently about the city of Morton, which is very small. Now this video about Franklin County, which is one of the smaller counties in Washington State. There's a lot of issues there that can be uncovered and stopped, and you can help some of those people who are in elected office right now. Maybe hold their feet to the fire, maybe just help expose problems they might have missed. You can get more involved by doing that if you want to go to some of our Doge classes that we're doing all around Washington State, helping train people to follow the money and dig deeper into the contracts and the finances of their local government. There's things like this, interesting things, maybe not this crazy, at least not unfolding the way it's going on in Franklin County, but you will find stuff like that out there if you look. But you have to be willing to show up. You have to be willing to engage because, as I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.